Welcome back. This third and last plenary session invites distinguished experts from seemingly unrelated fields such as smart city, artificial intelligence rankings, peace, urban regeneration, and university rankings to talk about innovative scientific methods and indices that can help organizations and communities assess and overcome difficulties caused by the current COVID-19. This session will be moderated by Professor Kabsung, Professor of Department of Urban Planning and Engineering and Vice President for University Planning and Development at Yonsei University. Professor Kim, over to you.
Hello, this is Kabsung Kim from Yonsei University. As a moderator of this session, I want to comment on the background and rationale of this session. 17 Sustainable Development Goals were selected for a global plan for an environmental, economical, and social sustainability future by the United Nations in 2017. However, at the time, we did not expect pandemic like today. There are many studies that show the social disparity has increased due to the pandemic. For example, because of the online education has made it more convenient not to go to school, but it is pointed out that the education decline of the children from the low-income families because of the differences in access to educational opportunities. Therefore, it is very meaningful to reconsider 17 SDGs and explore their relationships with the pandemic. The purpose of this session is to provide a place to discuss the various ways that is 4 indexes can be organizations and communities access and overcome difficulties caused by COVID-19. We invite 5 distinguished speakers from Yonsei and Times Higher Education. At first, I want to introduce the Professor Hoon. He will present Smart City Index related to the SDG. He is the Professor of Graduate School of Information, Yonsei University. And second speaker is the Keeheon Lee and JeongGil. They are the professors of the Yonsei University, and they will discuss about the AI rankings. And the next urban regeneration is presented by Professor Yong-Chan. Lastly, Mr. Baty will present university impact rankings. He sent a video instead of a participation here. After the presentation, we will have a discussion time with Michael Lineman. He is the managing director of Freshman Herald. And due to the time limit, I'm so sorry about to give only 15 minutes for each presentation. After presentations, we will have a discussion time with all panelists. So I turn the mic to the Professor Lee. Please start your presentation.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's my second time to coming to GEEF and presenting my work as well. I'm going to talk about the Smart City Index report, and this is our first time to actually announce it through this platform as well. After the pandemic, we've been going through a lot of new socio-economic urban changes, way of working or way of living, or way of even the playing has been changed, and especially we've been working, and this is a kind of impact into the different places in urban spaces as well. We also has got a lot of large gap of digital divide during the pandemic, that the vulnerable people couldn't get the internet access and didn't able to actually live through this period as well. Also, the economic challenges with the changing with the labor forces, that a lot of SMEs had a very difficult time. And industrial change itself has been changed through the online business has been growing up, while traditional industry has been damaged, impact negatively as well. So there are a lot of challenges here to resolve this, and obviously we need a new innovation through this period, and actually new way of actually thinking to actually bring out new innovation as well. So I see the smart city as a regional innovation platform, and there where actually the people are, citizens, and also the private and public stakeholders are actually all working together and to bring out the new innovation. And that's the kind of what I see as a smart city for the last 10 years. 2022 Smart City Index is actually third edition. We began to do it in 2017. The model was being developed in 2012 in Stanford Graduate School of Business, as to why I was in sabbatical as well. There are 8 perspectives to see how the cities are transforming to the smart city, and also more than 3,300 of smart city services, infrastructures, and project and living lab has been analyzed around 31 around the cities around the globe as well. So if I share some of the results here, that obviously we look at the whole sector of the services, or what kind of smart city services are actually providing within the city. We look at the predominantly actually until every year, the transportation has been one of the largest sectors to grow, but through the last 2 or 3 years, health and public safety area has been remarkably grown in here, whereas a lot of different kind of digital services has been supplied to the citizens, and there are a lot of innovative services has been putting the field economic recovery as well. We actually rank among these services where some of the cities are here, that Amsterdam and also Seoul and some of Barcelona are actually some of the leading cities here to in innovating a lot of different kind of services as well. So when I just look at the next slide, look at the urban intelligence, where the fourth industrial revolution technology has been implemented within the city. We see the 41% has been among these smart services infrastructure projects implemented in the this 4IR, which I call, and more than about 35% are using the IoT and big data to actually implement it in the different areas as well. Again, here the sector of public safety and also health area has been applied a lot of AI technology or machine learning to implement it and then providing the different kinds of services here. We see the Seoul has been outperformed well, and in terms of the in urban intelligence, followed by the Barcelona and Amsterdam and Helsinki as well. Related with the energy and environment issues, look at the urban sustainability. More than about 42% of these services, infrastructure, and projects are looking for the relate with this urban sustainability. Also, the energy and water and air quality are the most kind of innovating sector in infrastructures and project as well. We see that a lot of European cities are actually leading on this category. Amsterdam and Copenhagen. Obviously, the Amsterdam was actually renowned as the circular economy cities, and they are actually using all these technologies to implement and improve the urban sustainability using this smart city as well. I see this urban innovation as a very important factor to see how the cities are growing. Look at the two perspectives. One is actually looking at how innovative projects are going on within the city, while the living labs co-working with the citizens together, how many living labs are actually network are there, what kind of ecosystems are there as well to support these things. So I look at the Amsterdam has got the most highest living labs among the 31 cities, as Helsinki is the most innovative city. They're doing a lot of different kind of a project, including robots and as well. So this is the kind of one of the area that we need to look at it as well. And I think that in terms of innovations, most of the energy and environment sectors are growing fast, and it's been implemented within the city. Last one is the smart city governance. I see the 70 cities are actually selected sustainability as there's one of their 3 strategic initiatives when they look at setting the smart city strategy. I see the Vienna, Dubai, and Singapore are some of the leading cities to implement the SDG as some kind of a city performance or KPIs to formulate into the strategy as well. When we look at these 31 cities around the globe and look at their strategy in terms of the smart city implementations, they are looking at the kind of social inclusions is been rising topics, and also the how balancing the sustainability with the environment and energy using some such as like renewable energies has been implemented, and how we can actually use this in daily life. And that's been actually reformulating within the city. And this year we see, last year we see that a lot of cities has been changing their strategy and moving onto this directions among the SDGs as well. So these are the kind of sharing the thing. To conclude these things, I think the testbed for the innovation district has been very popular, and I think among the last 3 years, this district has been grown, especially in the energy and environment. And you can see there are a lot of projects are going on in terms of energy and environment among these smart cities as well. Again, using this 4IR technology, especially in AI, has been used in various factors. Previously, we've been using this in transportation mainly, but actually, as this health and safety area has been growing up and using these things, and we can see a lot of accelerations has been going on. So I think the urban intelligence is accelerating through the next few years as well. Last one is the social inclusions that we are trying to resolve the digital divide problems, as well as the kind of SDGs to set up setting the directions of these cities to using this technology to use for the goodwill with the energy and environment area as well. And so this will be very excited for the post-COVID-19 period, how city going to be changed, and this will be maybe the opportunity to explore how actually we go to implement smart and sustainable cities around the globe as well. And last one is actually we're going to share this report. It's available on this website, and also we are working together. Our collaborator is the University of Cambridge IFM Engage, and they are actually going to partner with us to explore this report together. And I think it is very interesting too. It's about 120 pages of a report as well, analyzing 31 cities for last 1.5 years as well. So it's great work there. So you can actually access it and have a look at it, and probably learn about what smart city is about around the globe from the trends and future perspective. Thank you for the listening, and I hope that you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for presentation. And also he reduced lots of time, so maybe next presentation could reduce more 5 minutes. Next time is AI rankings presented by Professor Lee and Ko. Maybe he will, instead of the presentation, they will have a dialogue with simultaneously. Start.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kim. So there is going to be a presentation. We're not just going to talk. So Professor Keeheon Lee and I, especially Professor Keeheon Lee, has been interested in this more intelligent way of analyzing institutions and their commitment towards different SDG goals for a while, and he's been looking into how we can use AI technologies, different data analytics technologies, to understand how different institutions, specifically academic institutions, are moving forward to achieving these different SDG goals. So we started discussing about how we can actually do this, and can you put my slides on, please? And we started a little work together. So traditionally, so these are some of the metrics that you would use to understand SDG engagement of a certain institution. For example, institutions like THE would capture data quantitative data and metrics to evaluate them based on certain criterias in a very manual manner, right? So you would collect the amount of electricity that you use, you would collect the amount of water usage, you would look at the amount of scholarships given on a need basis, et cetera, et cetera. You would use these metrics to evaluate the SDG engagement level of an institution. Another way, for example, like Elsevier takes is exploiting the keywords that different researchers within the institution are working on. So they would analyze all the different articles and their keywords listed in their database, and based on that information, you would try to get like an implicit understanding of what the researchers within that institution is focusing on. Now, maybe there are some other ways that we can do this. This is where we kind of started to talk together. Maybe we can start exploiting some opportunities from unstructured data, right? Usually academic institutions or research institutions have some form of videos for promotion purposes or different purposes. And maybe we can analyze the context inside those videos and try to understand the underlying message that these videos are trying to give. Will they imply any SDG goal related factors? Also, there are lots of textual and linguistic data provided by these institutions. I'll get to a little bit more detail into this in the next slide. And also, we have different types of institutional ads. These are the images that the institutions are trying to make for themselves. So, are they trying to show some form of SDG engagement using institutional ads? This is also an interesting direction that we can potentially look into. Now, today, I haven't looked at, I haven't looked at the results quite in detail yet, but Professor Keeheon Lee is going to provide some results from textual data and analyzing this textual data to identify different levels of SDG engagement. Specifically, we can potentially use things like speeches from institution leaders or institution-wide announcements on the vision. And also, we can look at by using this information, we can look at the direction of engagement, right? It's not a matter of what we did in the past. So how much scholarship, how much water, how much electricity did we use? It's about what we plan to do and what we should do. And this is the vision that these textual or linguistic data include or embed. So I threw him some sample data, right? So I collected university-wide leadership speech data, especially the speech data from the president of each university. Not all universities really made this available, so we selected those universities ranked relatively higher in the THE rankings for South Korea, United States, and the UK. We went through the website and we tried to grab all the presidential speech data. Unfortunately, we could we found all five for the top 5 THE ranked Korean institutions, but for the UK we were missing some data. So we have Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Yale, Duke, and the University of Cambridge as international institutions. And for domestic institutions, Korean institutions, we have our own Yonsei, Seoul National, Korea University, Hanyang University, and Sungkyunkwan University. So starting from the next slides are how the model is actually designed. So I think Professor Keeheon can take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Professor Go. You threw the data and I analyzed the data using the model our research group actually made. Is the slide on right now? Okay, I'll look at that one then. So basically, what we've done is that for about like 2 years ago, we made this model to automatically classify actions or statements that we're making, whether it's in SDG 1 or SDG 2 or SDG 17 or something. And we made this model using Word2Vec and bidirectional LSTM, which is used for sequence prediction. And it's actually working well in language model. So we use this model to make classifier to classify, identify whether some text is including goal 1 or goal 2 or goal 3 and so on. And so basically we trained this model on UN definition that were provided by UN, and so and the definitions of this UN definitions of SDG goals. SDGs actually include goals and targets and indicators. So we use those data to train our own model and made this classifier. And to visualize it, on the right hand side, you see the text, and the left hand side, you see the result. So basically, if you input the data, you get the result that whether the text includes or engage in with goal number 4 or goal number 5, and what percentage. So here it's to identify the degree of membership, I would say engagement to a certain goal. So based on the data that Professor go through to me, I had this result. And so on the left, you see international ones, and on the right, you see the Korean ones. So basically, you see the, we could find that universities are seeking SDGs, but here we see that spiky radar chart here, which means that it's imbalanced. So universities are working or promoting that they are doing this kind of good things, but with respect to this SDG 17 goals, we're kind of skewed and biased. So if we could see the result in detail, you can see that international ones or international universities are actually working more on like partnership or like I cannot see the goal number 9 right now. Industry innovation and infrastructure, whereas the Korean universities are right now, you see, and you see that are heading for more reduced inequality and somewhat different from international universities. So you see the difference from this radar chart, and you see the numbers on the right side are kind of indexes. Here, I want to emphasize that these indexes are not, the numbers are not for ranking, because these numbers are to show that we are in this status quo of engagement of SDGs, and mostly it's under under 6%. So which means that we are not that good at engaging in this SDG goals. And next. So if we look into the Korean results, Korean universities, we could see that goal number, with respect to goal number 4, quality education, before and after COVID-19, we're losing, I guess, the quality education right now. And if we see the gender equality, Yonsei University is actually working well on gender equality before and if you look at the before and after COVID-19. And actually, Korea University is doing well on goal number 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And we see that, next please. for climate action, most universities are not doing well comparing to pre-COVID, but Seoul National University is doing well. And we could see this kind of difference as well by using this measurement. And lastly, we could see that partnerships for the goals, Korea University was doing also well if we compare the result of pre-COVID and post-COVID. Is it really so?
Well, I do think this is a very interesting result because if you look at the data, so can we share the slides, please? Yes. So can you put the slides larger so that people can actually focus on the slides? So if you look at the data, the first thing that I was interested in, I was surprised actually, was that I actually thought that the Korean institutions were really focusing on the industrial engagement related issues, but it looks like we're way behind. I guess we're way behind in emphasizing that enough through the leadership messages.
Yeah, we should remember that this is not about what university did, but universities are seeking for, right?
Yes. That's what they're saying, yes. And I guess this pre-COVID and post-COVID results are also very interesting, especially which one was, so this is quality education, right? So it seems like the green lines are the post-COVID lines, and the yellow lines are the pre-COVID lines. And I think Yonsei University is the third row, right? So if you look at the third row, Yonsei is doing really well, to be honest. Not that I'm teaching here, but we're doing pretty well.
Overall,
compared to this, other institutions, whoa, long way to go, guys. So I think it definitely has an impact. Even for Yonsei, we do see a lowering trend after COVID. So it looks like there has been, I think this suggests that using this information is a valid suggestion for identifying what the university is trying to focus on. For the last 2 years, I think most of the institutions had, very critical issues that we needed to focus on, even beyond quality education. It was more related to the sustainability of the university itself. So a few discussion topics that I would like to throw is to you, I guess, Professor Keeheon, is that the data itself, I did give you the data, but were you able to observe any type of bias in the data or noticeable challenges in the, so I do know that the model itself was trained for English, the English language, so you had to translate the Korean speeches into English and then feed them into the model. Were you able to see any interesting observations in this process, data bias or translation related issues?
I could not see in depth, but I would tell you that there's a challenge in translation. So there might be some errors. That's what I'm guessing right now. But I think it relates to the next bullet. But I would say that we need to have some way to evaluate the performance. Maybe we need more experts to validate this result. Maybe we need to have more people included to see that this actually works or not. But I would say mostly based on what we trained on, we could tell that this actually works, because I would say index or indicator is something that so the value the indicator has is actually, the absolute value is not the matter. I would say the comparative values are actually something that we want to see. So I would think that this is a kind of good way to go, I think.
So yeah, that's if you put up the slide just one last time, that does relate to my second discussion comment that I had relating to the actual generalization of this AI classifier, whether it can actually serve as a real metric for practical evaluation. I guess you nailed it. And the point is that the absolute numbers that we see here from the classifier are very small, right? So the difference is if you compare different institutions themselves are going to be very small to begin with. So you're really comparing on a scale of 1 to 100 is 0.1 higher or 0.2 higher. You're really there. So I don't think this at the current point can serve as a direct metric for comparing institutions, but within an institution, I think it does give some meaning on the direction that the institution is looking into, and that's where this contextual data-based analysis can actually contribute to. So I guess through this very simple analysis of different institutions, what we try to show you is that there can potentially be more data that we can exploit. We're instead of using very formalized quantitative data, even by using contextual information, we can actually try and understand the direction of enhancing SDGs to how the institutions are doing in the direction of advancing their SDG goals. Okay, so I think that's, do you want to add anything to that?
I guess we're out of time.
Yeah, I think we're out of time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
presentation. I have a question to you, but if you purposely, I want to very curious about the mechanism. It's only the text mining, or there are some quality control can be controlled. For example, they just comment on word that is the more credit, or they giving some implementation planning, something like action plan, something like that should be proposed by the leaders. So at the time, maybe the weight should be different. So that kind of thing is can be handled with these models.
Okay. First of all, I want to emphasize that language models are based on languages, words, which means that, and it assumes that our thoughts are bounded to words. So, and also it assumes that the words that we are using, some words are used with a certain other word frequently. So those kind of patterns are captured by this, by directional LSTM model. And before that, we had this word2vec, which gives, I would say, I want to translate this into easy words, so sorry for the delay, but I would say word2vec actually gives us the relationship between the words. And based on those relationships, we can calculate what words would come next to the words that we have seen before. And so basically this sequential learning or sequence prediction gives us some space for us to identify whether some text is in some category or not. And here we have kind of finite and well-defined categories, which are goals and targets and indicators. So, so this actually gives us good model because the words are restricted and finite, and so it's I would say basically it's because our wordings or what we are speaking, what we're saying are actually have patterns, and that patterns can be captured within the sequence. So that's how it works actually. But I would say more if we have more time later on.
Okay, thank you. So next speaker is Professor Yong-Chan Kim. He is a professor of Department of Media and Communication, Yonsei University. He will present about urban regeneration.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to first thank everyone who's involved in organizing this very meaningful event. Basically, today I'm going to share some of my thoughts about indicators that we may use to evaluate the success and failure of urban regeneration, mainly from a communication perspective. You'll find out what I mean by communication perspective later in my talk today. When an urban neighborhood is declining and deteriorating, people think about making some changes there. There have been two approaches, basically, to making such changes in the declining neighborhood. First is urban redevelopment. This is basically about getting everything restarted from scratch. Bulldozers come and demolish everything that has been there, with the buildings and material conditions destroyed. All of the memories, stories, histories, and relationships will go away when we choose the option of urban redevelopment. We choose this option primarily for better economic value, quality of life, and modernizing and rationalizing neighborhood environment. Some people would think of this as too modern and too rational and even too violent. So as an alternative, we would choose the other option, which is urban regeneration. With urban regeneration, we would try to maintain what we have had even in the declining neighborhoods, such as old buildings, old alleys, streets, and familiar spaces. We try to reuse what are left over in the neighborhood with some adequate level of remodeling. But we try to keep in the process of urban regeneration and not just the physical stuff in the neighborhood, but the memories, the histories, and the meaning embedded in there. So today I'm focusing on urban regeneration between these two options. So some of the recent trends in the metropolitan city was declining of inner city and downtown areas. So people are moving out of the suburban areas because of this. As traditional local industries such as textile, metal, and manufacturing ones were disappearing, and workers, their families, and other related business also moved out of the neighborhood. Then a kind of vicious cycle can be set. So the neighborhood was getting even more deteriorating. Becomes a place where no one wants to visit any longer. So what does it mean to choose neighborhood regeneration or renewal rather than redevelopment in such situations? I think it means building community capacity to actively talk about neighborhood problems and solve them with others in the neighborhood. It also means creating new business activities or building local communities inside the neighborhood or bringing something new from outside. And urban regeneration means discovering or rediscovering locally based human, cultural, social, economic, and political resources. It is also for economic, social, physical, and environmental revitalization of the neighborhood with local community capacity. So Korean government recently has set some key goals of urban regeneration. As such goals of urban regeneration, they included improving housing conditions and the quality of life in the neighborhood, increasing urban neighborhood vitality, creating jobs, rebuilding local community and social integration, and dealing with gentrification in positive ways. And the Korean government also provided some indicators that can be used to evaluate any urban regeneration project. For example, as indicators of success and failure of urban regeneration, the Korean government recommended checking how much social overhead capital, so basic infrastructure in the neighborhood has been expanded, how many empty houses were taken care of, and how many new public housing units were provided. And there also should be increases in local investment, foot traffic, business sales, satisfaction with the focal landmark places, number of visitors and users of those places, and the level of satisfaction with urban technologies provided in the neighborhood. And the Korean government also recommended urban regeneration should be evaluated based on number of new local entrepreneurs, the number of jobs created by them, and social enterprise and public sector jobs. And in the goals of urban regeneration, the Korean government also included the increased level of local civic participation and communication among neighbors, trust in neighbors, and neighborhood belonging. I think all of these indicators recommended by the Korean government that I just shared with you covers most important aspects of urban regeneration. So actually, in fact, the Korean government indicators are pretty standard ones shared by many other attempts to evaluate urban regeneration in and out of Korea. But I think there's one important criteria that's missing in most of our urban regeneration indicators. It is about regeneration of neighborhood capacity to talk about their own stories. So if an urban regeneration project targets at rediscovering and rebuilding urban local communities as an important part of it, it has to be evaluated based on whether it rebuilds local capacity to storytell their own stories, their own issues, their own problems, and their own agenda. We can call it such capacity as community storytelling capacity. So such community storytelling capacity should be built on a specific type of local neighborhood infrastructure that we can call communication infrastructure in the neighborhood. So what is communication infrastructure then? In my theory building works on communication infrastructure theory, I have defined it as a community storytelling network set in its communication action context. So the first part is a neighborhood-based community storytelling network, where residents, community organizations, and local media stimulate each other to neighborhood stories. So they are not isolated actors. They can form a network that has much greater capacity than any one of them could do individually. So in the process of talking about shared neighborhood concerns, issues, or agenda, people construct the fabric of imagined community in their neighborhood. And then if you look at the diagram, the second part of the communication infrastructure is the communication environment in which the community storytelling network operates. So we call this as communication action context. So very briefly, the communication action context makes it harder or easier to have a strongly integrated community storytelling network in the neighborhood. For example, families and children who are afraid to be on the street or in parks or to walk home from school because they try to avoid being a victim of a neighborhood crime, they are less likely to meet their neighbors and build bonds, have a chance to get connected to local communication resources. And as another example, when residents have to go out of their areas to obtain the best child and family services available, they will be less likely to build a relationship with the local community organizations and to develop a sense of their community resources. So most of urban regeneration projects, I think, seems to have focused on the renewal of a physical, social, or sometimes cultural aspect of a communication action context. Not many projects are focused on developing community storytelling network. So, but from a communication perspective, especially communication infrastructure theory perspective, how much community storytelling network is built and strengthened should be considered as one of the primary goals of urban regeneration. And it has to be measured in the process of evaluating the urban regeneration project. So it's because the local community capacity to build a community storytelling network is the key to generating local community. With the community storytelling network, all the local stakeholders, including residents, would become more active participants in the process of changing their neighborhood. One of the side effects that we have discussed in many different situations was, especially in the context of urban regeneration, is gentrification. Due to gentrification, existing residents can be excluded from any benefits of urban regeneration. It will also have very negative impacts on local communication infrastructure. The indicators of urban regeneration should include something about how much urban regeneration deal with the problem of negative type of gentrification. I don't have much time to talk about gentrification per se today, but I still want to mention one new aspect of gentrification from, again, communication perspective. Recently, such gentrification has been expanded to have to what I have called media gentrification. So more and more local spaces are actually disconnected from nearby people and places, while only connecting to virtual relations and virtual spaces, and sometimes virtual customers. For example, many local stores, such as restaurants or even bookstores, only exist on Instagram without having meaningful relationship with the local neighborhood they physically belong to. So this also may have a negative impact on the local communication infrastructure that will work for strengthening local community storytelling network. So we need to develop indicators about how much each urban regeneration project address even this media gentrification problem. So the simple conclusion of my talk today is that the most important indicator one of the most important indicators of urban regeneration should be about whether it strengthens the local communication infrastructure that will help local stakeholders meet one another to talk about their own local stories, not the stories from somewhere else. So if we take a communication infrastructure theory perspective, the success or failure of urban regeneration should be evaluated at least with the measures of something like, I think the font is a little small, so I'm not sure how, whether you can really read them. So basically, the evaluation of urban regeneration should be based on our answers to the question like, how much the community storytelling capacity in the neighborhood has increased, and how many community stories are being produced and shared with the neighbors, and how much the collective efficacy of the neighborhood strengthened based on community storytelling network. How actively the local stakeholders, including residents, participate in every step of urban regeneration from planning to evaluation. Okay, this is it. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I look forward to some index, but there is no numbers. But it's very interesting. As an urban planner, it is very old the issues. The citizen participation is very important in the community level, but it's very difficult to have that. So in discussion time, I have a question to you. In pandemic situation, how can we elaborate this kind of capacity in community? Okay. So next presentation is Mr. Baty. He is the the organization. So he will present university impact rankings instead of the stay here. He sent a video recorded, so we watch the video.
Hello, I'm Phil Baty. I am the Chief Knowledge Officer at Times Higher Education. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor for me to be speaking at such an important event, at such an important time for humanity. I'm going to be talking today about the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings and how this new way of measuring excellence in global higher education is going to drive forward the agenda to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, and how it's going to empower universities around the world to deliver on the SDG agenda. I believe there is something of a great reckoning coming for global higher education. Fernando Ramirez, who was part of the UNESCO International Commission on the Futures of Education, a Harvard scholar, told Times Higher Education recently that in recent decades, the public and politicians are increasingly asking, what good do universities do for society? Who do universities serve? I think that is causing a reckoning, he says, within the higher education community, perhaps of comparable significance to the reckoning that led to the last major transformation of the university in widening access after the Second World War. There is this real sense that universities have to redefine their public mission, their social good, and really drive that forward. This has been exaggerated and heightened, I think, by dramatic changes in our world. We've, of course, had the implications of climate change becoming more and more clear to us all, the bushfires in Australia, for example, and of course, the tragic pandemic that has changed the world forever, devastated lives across the entire world, shut down borders for so long. These are challenges that universities are in the strongest position to help tackle. Their research, their knowledge, their teaching, their education, their outreach will be the key to solving some of the world's most challenging problems. And universities are increasingly understanding it's part of their mission. This is Dame Nancy Rothwell, the president of the University of Manchester. She said that universities are here to address the big questions and challenges facing our world. And there's no better framework for this than the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which apply to all countries and sectors of society. We believe, she says, that universities exist for public benefit. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, of course, provide an extraordinarily rich, interrelated and comprehensive framework for making the world a better place, from eradicating poverty and eradicating hunger to promoting good health, promoting good quality, driving the equality agenda, right through to areas of economic growth and decent work, and of course through to greening our energy, making sure we have a sustainable future in terms of life on land, life below water, and we take action on climate change. And bringing that all together, of course, is strong governance, peace and justice, strong institutions, and partnerships. So I think these do provide the absolute ideal framework to understand how universities themselves can make the world a better place, and how the interrelated activities and research of universities can drive forward all of these goals. Times Higher Education surveyed their global community of leaders. Around 200 leaders each year respond to the Times Higher Education Leader Survey, telling us about the major concerns and challenges their institutions are facing. Clearly from this research in 2021, there's a strong focus on the SDGs. To what extent do you agree that the pursuit of the SDGs informs how your university operates? Was one of the questions. You can see there overwhelmingly strong agreement. Similarly, we asked them, to what extent do the SDGs affect your institution's research priorities over the next 5 years? Very strong levels of agreement. The SDGs are becoming embedded in universities and are helping them understand their contribution to the world and to express that contribution. So Times Higher Education is absolutely thrilled that we have changed the game in understanding excellence in global higher education. We've been producing the World University Ranking since 2004. They are the gold standard of measuring research-intensive global universities. They are a trusted benchmark for university leaders, for governments, for students and their families all across the world. But we felt we had needed to understand universities in a broader context. Universities not just about pure scholarly excellence and scholarly impact. We wanted to understand their contribution to societal good, to economic growth, to societal improvement. So we created the impact rankings in 2019 based entirely on the Sustainable Development Goals and how universities are contributing to each and every one of those goals. It was seen to be an absolute game changer in terms of our understanding of excellence in higher education. If we can reframe excellence in higher education to include delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, we incentivize change, we incentivize universities to prioritize this activity, to drive forward this agenda. So we're incredibly proud of this. The World Economic Forum described these rankings as the world's first global attempt to document evidence of universities' impact on society rather than just research and teaching performance. So how do we do it? Well, we use 4 aspects of the theory of change. We look at a university's research, of course, their ability to create new knowledge, their ability to drive forward technological innovation, for example, in helping us towards renewable or more efficient energy, research towards improving our agricultural system to promote food security and help eradicate hunger. Every single aspect of the SDGs is being tackled through universities' new knowledge creation. So research is key. We also look at stewardship, the university's ability to manage its own affairs, to look after its own campus in a sustainable way, to look after its people in the correct way through promoting equality, for example, and sharing good practice around promoting female leadership, to name just one example. We look at outreach, a university's collaboration with industry, with the private sector, but also with the public sector, with governments and NGOs. Those collaborations will be crucial in transferring the knowledge in universities to the wider world, to driving this agenda. And of course, we look at teaching. Universities are empowering the next generation to behave in a sustainable manner, but they're also delivering direct graduate outcomes that help towards the Sustainable Development Goals. For example, here when we look at food, zero hunger, simply their projection of graduates into agricultural professions. The same applies to health, of course, providing healthcare workers across the world. The same applies to a whole range of SDGs. And what we do here is we take the measures themselves that UN created for the SDGs. There are 17 goals. The UN created 169 indicators, 223 unique targets. Universities aren't mentioned very strongly in the SDG framework, but it's absolutely clear to us that universities play a vital role every step of the way. So we took the UN's own agreed measures and indicators and targets, we converted those into 105 metrics for universities to look at, 222 individual measurements. So the rankings are very closely aligned to what the UN has agreed must take place to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. So how do we do it? Well, of course, when we look at research, we're simply searching the academic literature for research that is directly relevant to the particular SDG. We work with Elsevier, the Scopus database, to extract all the activity, for example, in this case, relating to good health and well-being. We've created categories with Elsevier to ensure that we're drawing in all the research from the Scopus database that is relevant to each of the 17 SDGs. So we assess that in many different ways, including, of course, citation, impact, etc., etc. We also look at evidence of your activities. In this case, clean water and sanitation. We simply ask universities to provide us with evidence of their activity. So, for example, when it comes to outreach, we ask a university as a body, do they cooperate with local, national, global governments on water security, on any of the SDGs? We ask them simply to tell us yes or no, and then we ask them to give us evidence for that, providing, for example, a link to a policy unit or an event they ran. And then we also give points if they can make sure this evidence is public, so that the wider community can benefit and learn from these documents and from this good practice. And then when we look at the overall ranking, we actually are ranking every single individual SDG. So if you're a university that's focused very clearly on one or two of the SDGs, you can simply submit to just those SDGs that are most relevant to you. You can submit to one or all of them. It's up to you and based on your mission. But in compiling the overall ranking, we create the best score of your results in SDG 17, which we make compulsory. You must submit to 17 if you want to be ranked overall, because that's about partnerships and collaborating for the goals. And then we'll take your score in the best 3 of your SDGs. So you have to submit to 17 and 3 others to be ranked overall, but you're welcome to be ranked on individual SDGs as well. Universities are really adapting to this approach. They're getting very excited about the opportunities. Dawn Freshwater told us it's an important reputational ranking, allowing the university to showcase the collaboration between academics and around the international community. At the University of Sydney, there's a clear need for universities to measure the work that they're doing towards the Sustainable Development Goals, to provide a clear framework to hold yourselves accountable to, something the global community values. So universities all over the world are embracing this new way of understanding excellence, not just to promote themselves, but also to encourage collaborations with others and to give themselves an accountability framework. So participation in this ranking has been extraordinary. The most recent ranking, 2021, we had 1,200 universities participating from 98 countries and regions across 6 continents. There's one overall ranking, one clear commitment to sustainability. But the growth has been phenomenal. In 2022, in April, at the Times Higher Education Innovation and Impact Summit in Stockholm, we will release the 2022 edition, and we know that more than 1,500 universities have taken part. You can see the growth over time. This ranking has only been around since 2019, and in every single continent, the growth has been remarkable. And I'm delighted to say, as this event today is hosted in South Korea, that Asia has been leading the way, driving forward this agenda with the fastest growth in participation and also the highest volume of participation. It really is an extraordinarily exciting thing to witness, this new movement of universities making this commitment to driving forward social and economic impact framed by the Sustainable Development Goals. And the results are incredibly inspiring. The world rankings tend to focus on a very particular group of global research-intensive universities, primarily based in America, the United Kingdom. But when it comes to the impact rankings, we're seeing a much greater diversity of university. The University of Manchester was #1 in 2021, but Sydney, RMIT, La Trobe universities in Australia made the top 10, Canadian universities made the top 10, a Danish, an Irish, a New Zealand, and a US university made the top 10. In the traditional rankings, there's only 2 nations, US, UK, in the top 10. This is much more inclusive, showing a much greater diversity of excellence. Excellence isn't concentrated in North America. Excellence isn't just about the most highly cited research papers, the Nobel Prizes. It's about making a difference to the world in so many different, multifaceted ways. And we can see that when we look at the #1 positions across the different SDGs. You've got the UK in there, you've got Canada, but you have Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Thailand in there. It's a much greater diverse range of leaders in this area. And I think it's contributing to this exciting global leveling up where we understand that excellence comes through diversity. Excellence is related to an individual university's mission. And if that mission is social impact, we can capture that now through these rankings. And you can see the difference here around traditional world rankings and the impact rankings. The Venn diagram there shows the participants in the world rankings and the participants in the impact rankings. There's a lot of crossover. Lots of universities want to contribute to both. They're world-class research universities in the traditional rankings, but they also want to show, like Manchester, that they're making a commitment to sustainable development. But you can see from the map there that the diversity comes out here. There is a top 100 South American university in the impact rankings, none in the world rankings. There are 2 African top 100 universities in the impact rankings, none in the traditional world rankings. You can see there Australia's dominance and impact is really shining through in the top 200 with 21 compared to just 6 in the world rankings. And then you can see the dominance of the dominance of North America is not anywhere near as significant for impact. It's a more diverse and more global picture of excellence. Just wanted to start to conclude on some thoughts about this community we're building. Dame Nancy Rothwell, president of the University of Manchester, I quoted her at the beginning of this project, but I wanted to extend the quote. This is a comment she gave to Times Higher Education. She said, "We believe that universities exist for public benefit. To support this, we have placed social responsibility as one of our core goals for the past decade. We are pleased to be part of a growing community of universities committed to measuring and sharing their social impact. That's what I wanted to end on, this idea of a community, this idea that we're exposing a new type of excellence, exposing a contribution that universities make to the world that's been previously hidden. This idea that by exposing that in the form of a ranking with a data set, we can build a community, we can build communities of best practice, we can share best practice, we can showcase best practice, we can encourage universities to collaborate and share. So on that note, I just wanted to say, please do join the movement, get in touch with us, impact@timeshighereducation.com. Contact me directly, phil@timeshighereducation.com. Engage with us on social media, just phil_Baty or @timeshighered. I'm absolutely thrilled to have been able to contribute this session to this important meeting. I'm delighted to continue this agenda, to drive this movement forward, and to be part of such an exciting community. So thank you very much for your attention and your engagement and your continued commitment to driving universities towards delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Yeah, we watched video, so this is very good presentation, I think. So, I'm not sure you know, the Yonsei University is the leading university in the world for the impact rankings. Last year, we ranked in 30th in the world and first place in Korea. Now we will have a pre-discussion time. So the guest is the Mr. Michael Lineman from the freshman Harvard research. So what is your impression of the whole this presentation first, and then maybe we can talk a little more.
Yeah, so first of all, I think that there are two things that have really struck me today from the conversation. One word that I've heard come up throughout each of the presentations today is accountability. I think that when we're thinking about measurement and when we're thinking about indexing, there is the science, there is the mathematics and the statistics behind creating these rankings. But ultimately, when we're thinking about these in the context of the SDGs, this is really a matter of accountability. And that means a couple of different things. Not only does that mean that we are accountable to the success of these SDGs, but also to driving forward the mission that is behind the SDGs, to bringing organizations together, whether they are individual communities, whether it's institutions within higher learning, whether it's smart cities. Part of the beauty and the simplicity of the SDGs is that they serve a valuable function, not only in holding us accountable, but communicating to bring more into the fold, more organizations to participate, because the goals that we are setting for ourselves through these SDGs can't be accomplished by any individual organization. It's only through the community of organizations. So accountability is really where I start here, because when we are thinking about the math, the comparisons, this is how we hold ourselves accountable. We compare ourselves and see how we stack up, and encourage each other to take the lead. The second thing that I think really has come out of the discussion that I find quite interesting is that much of what we are doing is measuring so that we can communicate. Throughout each of the presentations, we've talked about the ways that people are using the data around the SDGs to communicate what success looks like, what additional work needs to be done, and to look at the landscape and how it's changing. As we think about the way that COVID in particular has changed this landscape, we've needed to communicate in drastically different ways surrounding the SDGs. The focus for the international community has changed as a result of COVID. We've needed to break through a lot of chatter related to the international pandemic to really insist that there are additional commitments that we need to be looking at. So this communication, I think, is very important when we think about the SDGs. When we think about the communities, whether it's a university community, a local community, a city, the media is really how we get people on board to push things forward. And to take it back to my first point, to hold organizations, institutions, and in my line of work, corporations accountable.
So I can find it from your bio. You are very expert in consultant on the country or the firms, right? So I have a question to you. Nowadays, the famous word is ESG, Environmental Sustainable Governance. It is very similar to the SDGs, right? So what is how can you define the two of them?
Yes, so I think that they are interrelated concepts. While we've had the SDGs for quite a few years now, the concept of ESG, environment, social, and governance, within corporations has been quite a popular topic for many more years. Within the last 5 years, it's become a bit of a buzzword. You have ESG focus within organizations that often drives things like their sustainability reports. You have ESG-oriented investors. You can go out and reach out to your financial advisor and request that your money be deposited in an ESG index fund that has the values of environment, social, and governance behind it. As this really has become a buzzword and an important topic, I think it is a useful categorization, but at the same time, it can lead to a lack of accountability. I've heard in some of the sessions before this, some of the things that we need to watch out for while we are driving for progress are purpose washing, are green washing, are woke washing. So when we're thinking about ESG, I think that the SDGs are very important alongside this because there are measures, there is accountability. So being able to think about ESG, the way that I like to think about that concept is through reputation. Reputation has two dimensions for me. One is what you say. So as an organization, as an institution, as a government, it's important that you're communicating what you aim to do, what goals you're setting for yourself. But the other side of that is perception among your stakeholders. And for this, it really is important to measure what are the expectations, how are they holding you accountable? And this is where we can get to the heart of where ESG is meaningful. If you're just speaking to ESG, you fall the victim of over-communicating and under-delivering. If the expectations are high and you're not communicating, that means you're not gaining momentum. So the sweet spot is in the middle of those two, where there is communication, where you're very clear about what you aim to do, the time horizons in which you're doing those things, and importantly, what you've accomplished. And then on the other side, that you're also focusing on what the expectations are. I want to dive deeper on that one for a moment because expectation setting and aligning with stakeholder expectations is so important because it allows progress to be made quickly. When I think about different types of companies that I work with, often the conversation is, we need to do so much. Where do we prioritize? Where do we focus first? And where can we do the most good? This conversation happens around SDGs as well. If you look at any individual corporations, SDG plans, SDG milestones, 2025 plans, 2030 plans, 2050 plans, you won't see all of the SDGs in there. You'll see a select few. And this is because organizations are prioritizing where they can have the most impact and the most value. So whenever we are working with organizations, one of the first steps is understanding where can they have the most impact. And this is often defined going back to business theory, to Jim Collins' concept of the hedgehog. Where can they combine their excellence with the need state, with the ability to replicate that? So a lot of the research that we do is helping organizations understand where is that central point that they can have the most impact? Once they know that, once they know what the expectations are, I think there is an ability to create momentum and velocity to drive change in partnerships, knowing that this is such a big component of the SDGs. It also is something that we are looking at when we're advising corporations on ESG and other topics. Where can they not only set goals for themselves, but put themselves at the front of the conversation to drive change? So again, we have the balance here of communicating, but also setting and meeting expectations with stakeholder groups to actually see the change that they're aiming for in the real world.
Thank you for your explanation. And one more question is, now we concerned about pandemic situation, so within 2 years, can you share some good examples of the corporate or the country's example?
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggest examples that I think has been front and center for all of us during the pandemic is the pharmaceutical industry. While I think all of us have had interactions with healthcare, interactions with medication that are produced by pharmaceutical companies, we have been forced by ourselves, but also by the situation that we're living in, to focus on how rapidly these companies can bring change to the marketplace to stabilize and to normalize how we live our day-to-day lives. So we've been along for that journey since all the way back in April of 2020, when inside Moderna, inside J&J, inside Pfizer, conversations started. This is a thing that is happening. It's going to be big. How can we set goals? How can we develop new science to help combat this? So I think what is really interesting there is that we've had this focus. We've had so much science accomplished, but communication has been such a major factor of this. And this takes me back to not only understanding what's communicated, but also what's achieved. We've achieved billions upon billions upon billions of COVID-19 vaccines, which is amazing. But as we look at the rollout of these vaccines, we haven't necessarily had the consistent communication. So we see a lot of divergence. While the goal, I think that everyone would agree, is to move past the COVID-19 pandemic to achieve immunity, we are seeing that that is taking longer than all of us expected, because the communication of those end goals, the communication and transparency towards how that has worked, has been successful in many cases, but has been needing additional things in others. So I think that when we think about how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way that we think about the SDGs, goals and achievements, this stakeholder orientation is a major one, needing not only to produce something that is going to change the world, like a COVID-19 vaccine, but also to regularly, transparently communicate what is happening as it is happening, to form a level of trust and accountability. This has been festering within our societies for a long time, but COVID-19 has really put it at the forefront for us. So as we do move forward past the COVID-19 pandemic, and look at some of these target date ranges, 2025, 2035, 2050, for the SDGs, maintaining that focus on how we are communicating progress, how are we holding ourselves accountable to progress, and bringing stakeholders in so that they don't feel they are being talked at, but they are conversing how they can be a part of progress, I think is really important. And you know, the phrase is thrown around a lot in terms of the way that society has changed, the new normal. This is the new normal of communications. There is this stakeholder engagement that needs to happen around all of the benchmarking, around all of the communication about benchmarking, for us to be able to implement these changes in a society that has become even more skeptical.
Thank you. So if you have any question to others panelists, you can do. If not, Professor Kim, from your presentation, the capacity building is very important, but in pandemic situation is very difficult to meet together for the citizen level. So how can we build this kind of thing?
Well, I think any event has two sides of a story. So I think on one hand, I think during the pandemic situations, I think a lot of people have had the experience of kind of rediscover their own neighborhood, because sometimes they never went to a local stores at local market. But I think during the pandemic, they started trying to kind of explore what's in there, what's in their neighborhood, and trying to just stop by the local places or local stores. I think that's one story. But on the other hand, people are still kind of scared of the meeting strangers, for obvious reason. And also a lot of times the people are just stuck in their own just a strong tie relationships. Actually, I just finished the collecting and analyzing survey data where we found that it's actually people's the strong ties, ties based on their the families and friendship, the relationship got stronger during the pandemic years. So actually we used the panel data before and after pandemic, and then at the same time the people's the relationship based on weak tie got much weaker. I think probably this is kind of the experience that we all had. So people just stuck in their family relationship and the very close the friendship network, while just getting away from all other kinds of relationship. I think that. So I think if we consider these two, I think that's a good story and bad story for local neighborhood. So I think this is a kind of give a chance for people to think about their own neighborhood. But again, if you use the concept of communication infrastructure that I shared, so the neighborhood has built kinds of communication infrastructure already that people can use when they began to have an interest in the neighborhood. So if they don't have this kind of neighborhood resources that can rely on to get access to this kind of communication infrastructure, even when they have a certain level of interest in their neighborhood, they simply don't know what to do. They don't know where to go, and they don't know what's the first things that they can do to get more meaningfully connected to their the neighborhood. So I think this is a good time to think about what we can do to strengthen communication infrastructure in each local community, and not only in the context of urban regeneration, but also in every urban neighborhood that we will live in.
When I was participating in urban regeneration project, sometimes I find the citizens is very old, so they don't express their own opinions sometimes. So how can we resolve that kind of problem? We say the citizen participation is very important and we should listen to their voice, but they don't have any knowledge about the city and something like that. So what is the role of the facilitator or some government leaders, something like that?
I think that's why we need also various types of community-based organizations, and also the local media have to be facilitated. I think these are kinds of things that we have missed, especially in a very rapid urbanization process especially in Korea. We have lots of different kinds of the media, including mainstream and other things. But usually in my class, I ask my students about whenever you want to know what's going on in Sincheon district this weekend, what kind of media do you use? So, for example, if they might want to get some kind of information about restaurant or any type of music event or something like that. But actually, no one knew about them. Yonsei Chunchu didn't. Well, actually, they are supposed to have this kind of function as kind of local, really hyper local media, not only covering the university campus, but also actually they could cover surrounding neighborhood. I think Yonsei Chunchu has to do something about this, but basically, simply there's no media that people can rely on to know what's going on in their immediate neighborhood. I think developing this kinds of really hyper local media, people can. It has to be really attractive because even though the local media is there, if people don't want to use it, it's just useless. So there should be some really relevant local media people want to rely on, want to use, and also with the help of community organizations. Then probably these institutions can work as kind of facilitator for local residents, the old and young, and in all different types of the residents.
Thank you. Can the AI can help that kind of things, Professor Lee?
I think so. Professor Go, what do you think? So, you speak first.
Well, I guess it can enable some type of communications and connectivity. Honestly, I don't have a smart idea at this point on an exact model we can use for this purpose. Can you go first? Maybe I can chime in.
Okay. I was thinking of kind of chatbots, or these days we have companion bots as well. So if we can afford that to old people, and they speak to this companion bot or something, or a kind of chatbot or something, to get help from that bot, then they feel usefulness, and they'll give data to that bot, and local government can have some data to analyze, and they'll have some kind of familiarity with this bot. Then they'll use this as kind of media, right? So, and I would say at some point people will rely on those bots, and people will say something to those bots. For example, like what we're doing to our AI speakers. So we speak to AI speakers. In the beginning, we didn't, but nowadays many people are doing with higher familiarity, right? So. Okay,
so if we're going into robots, then we have ideas, right?
Okay.
I mean, if we're talking about machine learning models, no, but if we're talking about robots, yes. So I think one of the reasons that we're really disconnected, I guess locally, as Professor Kim mentioned, was is the fact that we don't have a globally accessible media. What I mean by that is, I think this was part of the session that I had yesterday, but so if you talk to younger generations, they're going to go to Instagram. If you talk to people in their 30s and 40s and 50s, they're probably going to go to Facebook. If you talk to people above that, all they have is Kakao Talk. And the information, maybe if they're really, tech savvy, they can go to Naver and do a search, right? I mean, this communication gap between generations, between the populations, is really causing this, I guess, this communication, the lack of communication within the local community. And what we really need is a technology to kind of bridge the gap between these generations, which actually form the local community, right? The local community is not about 20-year-olds, it's not about teenagers, it's not about 60-year-olds, it's every one of them. The problem is, you know, in the older days, we had something called a newspaper, right? We had something called a newspaper. Sometimes we would have banners. And we would look at them and see what's happening. Now, I think when Professor Kim talked about gentrification, we had issues like, you know, some shops just being on Instagram and not connecting with their neighborhood. That's exactly what's happening. So we actually need a physical device that can actually be the agent, be the proxy to share the information. When I said I didn't have any idea about AI models at first, I was, you know, thinking about, you know, LSTM or these professional deep learning models. But I think having a robot is actually a better idea than it sounds. I mean, it sounds very, you know, I'm just using this word due to a lack of a better expression, stupid. But if we have these mobile robots that anyone can access throughout locations, it's sad that we have to use a robot, but if we do have these robots, I think it can be a communication post for different people, right? I mean, technology can be used in this type of sense. Of course, we still have issues, right? Who's going to be putting in the information? How are the people going to be interfacing with the device? Younger generations are going to be talking their own language. Elder generations are going to be talking their own language. But how are we going to kind of proxy this over is a different challenge. But what I'm basically trying to say is that we need some type of physical device that, you know, may not be as tech fancy, but we need some type of physical device here and there where people actually move around to kind of share this information through a larger population.
I would say that will emphasize a UI as well, right? User interface? Yeah. So it should be more natural to certain age group, right? So to young people who use Instagram, to old people who don't use Instagram, they have to have same access to same information, right? So, but the way the information goes to them would be different. So they would have different UIs to different age groups, but same information. And at the same time, I would say there would be some kind of, so I would say robot needs AI to detect and classify what people are saying. At the same time, I would say there is some danger of information overflow, right? Today we see a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and there, if we have a lot of media, a lot of natural media with natural UI, here media would be, for example, robot, then the robot may have to analyze whether the data that the robot is getting is actually true or false, or is it as if we're intentionally making disinformation or something, right?
So I think when I actually experiencing during the pandemic, because I've been doing a lot of living lab projects, so there are various sort of stakeholders or citizens actually involving in the projects, and throughout these projects, the challenge was actually we couldn't meet at all, right? So I think this online tools like Zoom or some other tools, we actually try to be innovative to how we can actually get the opinions from citizens and how actually we can actually getting a lot of different things. So as a facilitator role, I think it's more complex and more challenging for actually doing these things. But I think more going into this online and offline kind of complementary kind of living lab sessions or citizen participation session. I think the city itself, they realize that the technology will be very important to place, and then actually starting as a kind of communication platform. When I look at the other cities, like this kind of citizen engagement platform, that they need take a lot of time to build up at the offline, and then move to the kind of automating the some of the process as well. So that give you more kind of tools and techniques that citizens can actually use and find the useful insight to come out. So for example, like we do the kind of topic modeling or to actually rank the topics that what they discussed, and then bring next sessions to actually talk about these things. So these are the kind of more I think cities are actually engaging with these techniques or tools to actually facilitate this kind of civic participation activities around the world. Yeah.
Thank you. We say the smart city is the data-driven city. So there are many big data in city and behavior data. So we can work together maybe in the future. So maybe next year the session could be used in this kind of AI and city. And right now we have 4 or 5 minutes. So my last question is this. The frequent question to me was the after pandemic, we will go back or we will go forward. So what do you think? And each one can say 1 minute, something like that.
I think it's definitely changing. I mean, when I look at the index report this year, that I think a lot of cities are reformulating their strategies to bring, and I think the changing the behavior that the people can actually, for example, like align with the SDGs and more greener and more smarter cities as well. So I think definitely they're going to be changed. Especially, I talked with all these corporate people that they only go to the companies 1 or 2 days a week nowadays. So you can see it's going to be change in the urban spaces or housing spaces even, and way we actually ordering something. I think there will be the post COVID-19 period. I think this different technology will be applied, and we can see the AI or all this for industrial revolution technology will be accelerate even more to actually come into our daily lives as well. So I can see what will be the impact or change or social changes will be very interesting to look for next few years.
Professor Lee?
Since we don't have enough time, I'll just say that AI will be a great help to us if we use it appropriately. And I will just move.
Okay. So going back or not, I don't think this is we have a binary answer for this, right? I mean, if you look at the SDGs that we've analyzed, in some aspects there were, we see some improvements in certain aspects, right? For example, because of all this online teaching, if we think about the diversity of the population who can actually get access to educational technology has improved over the pre-COVID era. Right, and these aspects we want to keep, right? I mean, and certain aspects that we lost related to our investment in the climate change and these type of aspects we need to regain, right? So I don't think this is a matter of going back and forth after the pandemic. I think that we should learn the lesson that this new effort or this new trial and error session that we had over the last 2 or 3 years. We learn what we can benefit from here, extrapolate that, keep it, and try to put our resources back into the SDGs that we've missed over the last few years. I think that's what we need to do.
Okay. Professor Kim?
Yeah, basically I'm on the same page as other presenters just said. I think we went through kinds of experimental times. So in the context of the city and city life, I think we kind of try to see what's possible, what is still possible, and what's impossible, and what continues to be impossible, something like that. And also kind of we arrange our life between totally mediated and totally unmediated, based on face-to-face communication. So I think I rearrange, what has been conventional and what has been, or what people have considered as commonsensical in terms of way of communication in the context of urban in urban context. So probably after pandemic ends, so probably I think we need to think about how we gonna reimagine kinds of life we're gonna have in urban neighborhoods and in larger urban city context.
Okay, thank you. Because of time limits, I should close our discussion right now. Thank you for all the presentation. I think it is not enough to discuss today, so we will it's just the starting point to consider our 17 SDG with the pandemic and after the pandemic. So I hope further researches and discussions will be conducted by the participants and audiences. Thank you for all participants in on and offline. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Professor Kim and the panelists. Living in the world of big data, it is easy to get lost. So I really admire the thoughts and the hard work that our professors have invested to harmonize, process, and analyze different forms of data, to give meaning to accelerate the agenda of sustainable development. Unlike capital, land, or labor, using data once does not diminish its value. So we look forward to hearing updates from our professors next year. Now we will take a short break and resume at 12:30 Korean time.